Good morning again. It's Anthony. Go ahead, grab a cup of coffee or your favorite beverage, and let's have another chat. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to survive that first semester as a graduate student. Well, hopefully, you've settled in and you're ready for some advice or ideas on what you need to worry about or focus on that first semester of grad school. And for today's talk, I've got sort of four talking points that I want to spend time on, and we'll see how long it takes. What's interesting about the first semester and like new students in grad school is there's a lot of jitters, there's a lot of pressure, maybe those first 2 weeks before school starts. And then once you get into the swing of school, a common, I don't, not a complaint, but a common remark that I've heard from students is, boy, this is easier than undergrad, or, oh, I've got so much time on my hands. Or if you're used to taking lab courses, you're not taking lab courses, you're just taking lecture courses. And so it can seem those early impressions are that grad school isn't that difficult. And I've got all this time on my hands, and maybe you're teaching a class or you've got some other activities you're involved with, but you also have a lot of time to socialize. You kind of, can come in a little bit late, depending on your schedule. And it just seems like, wow, like, why wouldn't I want to be a grad student? This is so great. This is so easy. And don't fall into that trap. That's my first bit of advice, and it's not even on the PowerPoint slide for today. But time management will become a critical part of grad school, and for a lot of people, those first few weeks aren't going to be so bad. They're going to be kind of relaxed pace, and the pace will slowly pick up. And you just got to be aware that even if the first few weeks seem easy and like carefree, that you need to really make sure you make the effort to manage your time wisely. So for a lot of grad students in the sciences, you're going to be working as a teaching assistant that first semester, and that might take 10 to 20 hours of your week. And so even though you're maybe not taking a lab class or spending time, you know, taking your own lab courses, you might be teaching a lab course, and it's going to take a lot of time to prep for that and to grade all those student lab reports or quizzes, whatever you're doing for your teaching assignment. And one week it might be really easy where you're putting in less than 10 hours, and the next week you might be doing so much grading that it's closer to 20 hours you're putting in. And usually those first couple of weeks of teaching are pretty easy. You're talking about the syllabus, you're, maybe doing your first activities or first quizzes, but you're not doing a lot of grading. And then as the semester rolls on, as a teaching assistant, you'll realize the grading load and the prep load ends up increasing as the semester goes on. And your classes will also pick up the level of intensity as the semester goes. So don't be fooled those first few weeks of the semester if it seems like things are easy, because you things could pick up very suddenly, and then you'll find yourself sort of slammed and having a difficult time catching up. So time management is really important, and learning time management skills are important, because once you get done working as a teaching assistant or done with classes, you're going to have to do a lot in the research side of your degree. And as a result, your responsibilities will change over time during grad school. But it's a trick as a grad student to manage your time wisely so you're meeting deadlines and taking care of your responsibilities. And also, what I would say, one of the things you want to do during that first semester is spend some time figuring out, where do I want to do my study? Where do I want to spend time where I need deep focus and distraction free? And usually you want to have a few locations for this, and you're always going to be scoping out maybe for another new location. But, if you've got an office, that might be great, but there might be a lot of distractions there, like other people talking or working or coming and going, and it may not be a very good distraction free place to work. You may have an apartment, but the problem with having an apartment, Like for me right now is I hear people upstairs pounding around making noise. I've got somebody outside cutting lawn today. The garbage guy just came a little while ago and was slamming dumpsters. And it's, there can be a lot of distractions at your apartment, especially during the day. Another option might be the library. As a grad student, I was fortunate enough that my office was just a block away from the library. So I would go over there and I would maybe hide in the stacks or in the reading room. And that was a pretty good place, but it really depended on, what the undergrads were doing. If the undergrads were in town and finals were coming up, the library was too busy to get anything done. So, there's lots of places, and it's good to have a few options. And one of my favorite is still just having a coffee shop. But when the undergrads find it, then it, it loses its appeal. So it's good to have a few options and a few backup plans where you can study, and just developing your study skills, study habits, and locations. So the second part of what I want to talk about is what kinds of activities will you be busy with, and what kind of decisions do you need to make during that first semester? And just as a reminder, like I'm kind of approaching this from my background in grad school as a chemist and also in meteorology. And in both cases, one was a master's, one was a PhD program, but it was very similar. And when I've talked to people about their experiences in other areas of STEM, it's usually fairly similar to this, but sometimes schools have a little bit different way of approaching it. So typically, your first semester, you're going to spend some time rotating through several research groups. And how this works is a little different at every university, but typically the general approach is that you will have to spend about a month in three or four different research group activities. And so you'll be assigned three or four different research groups that you're going to spend time with. And on some cases or some universities, maybe that just entails having a conversation with the faculty member who runs the group, and that's it. Like when I was a meteorology student, basically I had several conversations with four different research faculty, and I was trying to figure out like who's the best fit for me, who's doing a research project I enjoy the most. And then at the end of the semester, I basically had to list one through four my priority as far as like which professor do I want to work with the most, down to which one do I want to work with the least. In chemistry, there was more activity. I went to the lab and met with the students and postdocs in each group. I didn't do any work in the lab, but basically I spent time around the people, watching them work, asking them questions, learning about their research. I would go to weekly research group meetings where one of the students or members of the group would talk about their research or present their latest findings or maybe talk about a paper they read. And so it was an opportunity for me to meet the faculty, but also meet the people working for them and develop some relationships there and figure out like, is this a good fit for me or not? And really, when you go through this rotation process, there's sort of three things you want to kind of keep in mind or you want to pay attention to. One is the faculty member. Do you like the faculty member? Is it someone that you could work for or work with? The second thing you want to keep in mind are the people in the group. How do you get along with the people in the group? Do you get along with them well? Do you respect them? Do you find chit chat easy to come by with them? Do you enjoy working around them? Is it collegial? Is it cordial? Or is it cold? And maybe the same thing with the faculty member. Like, are they kind of cold and distant, or are they friendly and welcoming? And depending on your personality, what you're looking for, you might be a good match or a poor match with the faculty member or the group. And then the third thing you want to keep in mind during rotations is, what about the research? Do you find it interesting? Do you find it exciting? Is it something you want to spend 5 or 6 years working on? And when you talk with people in the group, you want to ask or kind of find out like how productive is this research? What is the stage of it? Like, are they making progress? Are they stymied? Are they having a difficult time moving the projects forward? Is there funding? So you want to kind of have, a general idea of, maybe it's exciting research, but maybe it's very slow in moving forward. Or maybe it's very routine work, but it's easy to get results. And so, depending on your personality or your interests, you want to make sure that you're doing work that's interesting, but you're also working with people that you can work with. Um, Kind of the story that a lot of people will tell you is that when picking a research group and you're doing rotations, those are the three things you want to focus on. But don't expect you're going to love the professor you're working for. You're going to love all the people in the group you're working with, and you're going to love your research project. If you love two of the three, that's pretty good and that's pretty typical. But usually you're going to have some kind of dynamic where your research is going to be frustrating, or maybe you don't see the professor of the group very often because they travel a lot, or they just have so many obligations, or a big group, and as a result, you don't get to spend much time with that person. Or maybe you're going to be in a situation where it's just the dynamic between you and the other people in the group is a little bit colder or distant. So, you have to kind of decide like which group do you fit with best. And there typically isn't a perfect fit. You're either going to find a situation where I like three groups and I can't decide, or it's just kind of a difficult decision, and that maybe you have a problem with each of the groups you rotated with, and you have to decide like, okay, I see them for what they are, but now I need to pick one of them. And I will tell you that there are occasions where students come in with the mindset that they know on day one who they want to work for, and there's nobody else they're going to even consider. And my word of advice for everyone, but especially those people, are you need to take rotations seriously. And there's two reasons for that. One is you may have your heart set on who you want to work for and you have your reasons, but during the rotation process, you may see something that makes you change your mind. And it's better that you realize that during the rotation process than after you join the group and maybe, a few weeks in you realize I can't work for this group. Well, you've made your decision and you're going to have a tough time switching groups at that point. So you want to take it seriously. The faculty member could also decide that for some reason they don't want to take you. And if that was the only person you were interested in, well, now what are you going to do if they don't accept you? Or maybe they don't have funding, or maybe five students want to work for the same professor and they like somebody else over you. So there's always a chance that even if you got your heart set on a specific group, you may not get in. And so you need to be prepared for that as well and make sure that you take your second and third options seriously. Because oftentimes, I don't know the statistics, but a lot of students don't necessarily get into their top choice. It is a mutual decision where the faculty member has to decide they like you and want you in their group. It isn't just your decision. The other thing is these faculty, you need to know people in your department besides just the people you're working with, because you may collaborate with other research groups. And at some point, you are going to be asked to put together a thesis committee. And the thesis committee is comprised of faculty in your department. And how are you going to make that decision if you haven't had conversations with them and know what their expertise is? And so if you take the rotation process seriously and you develop a good friendship or relationship with other faculty in the department, then when the time comes you need to select your committee, these faculty are already going to know who you are. And when you ask them to be on the committee, they're more likely to say yes to you. You also want to use the rotation process. If there's like one or two faculty you meet and you realize, I really don't get along with this person, well, then you probably don't want them on your thesis committee either, or you want to think seriously about putting them on your thesis committee. So doing the rotation process helps you to figure out what research group you're going to join, but it also helps you figure out who's going to be on your thesis committee. And you're going to be part of a department, and you want to make sure that you know who people know who you are, and you are part of that collegial atmosphere. So participate in it and make the most of it, because you're developing relationships that could be very valuable to you down the road. And maybe even if you faculty you're going to hit it off with, and they can write a letter of recommendation for you down the road. And you find out what interests faculty have outside of their jobs. And I could tell stories about that, but I'm getting long-winded as it is. But it's always good to have sort of relationships with different faculty, so they know who you are, you know who they are, and those are relationships you can maintain for a long time, even after grad school. So just one kind of final word is, a big part of the first semester is figuring out what research group you want to join. And how that works, as I've already kind of said, is you rotate with 3 or 4 research groups, spend some time with them, get to know them. And then typically around the end of November, early December, all the students submit their choice or list of choices. And then the faculty at some point, usually in December or early January, will look at those and make a decision as far as, okay, who do I want to pick? And so usually right at the end of December or early sometime in January, the students will find out what group they've joined. And then during the second semester, you'll actually join that group in a formal way. And so I can talk more about that in a future video, but that is really the big overarching theme of this first semester is, figuring out how to just get through your classes and your responsibilities for that semester and manage your time, but also figure out what group you want to join. And depending on what kind of major you have or what school you're at, those experiences can be a lot different than what I've described. But in general, from talking to people at other schools and other departments, it's fairly similar what the general overview or structure of that looks like. So I hope you enjoyed today's video and found it informative. And if so, please tune in next time when I'll talk more about how to survive as a grad student.